In the early 1980s, there were approximately 384,000 Chinese inhabitants in America. Today, in 2015, there are roughly 5 million. What were the effects on the American population when the Chinese arrived? While America has always been known as a place of freedom and opportunity, it only started reaching the ears of the Chinese in the 80s. Events like the gold rush in San Francisco enticed millions of Chinese immigrants to brave a new life for their families and immigrate to America. Because of the poor economy in southeastern China, there was a large push for many Chinese men to come to America, in hopes that they could escape the poverty and social unrest that characterized their homeland. In 1849, gold was discovered in California, which created a beacon for many people from all parts of the world, including over 40,000 young Chinese men and entrepreneurs, hoping to find wealth. Although many Chinese immigrants came to America to find new opportunities, they soon became a burden to the Americans who did not welcome them. Many of the Chinese miners were the targets for violent attacks in the mining camp. Chinese miners received little protection in mining camps as American miners are more favored. The new California state legislators passed a foreign miner tax. Even though it was passed, the Chinese miner had no choice but to pay the tax. As soon as the gold rush died down, some Chinese immigrants stayed in California to find other work. Around that time, the Transcontinental Railroad began. Central Pacific started hiring more Chinese immigrants because they were easy to bring over from Canton. The Central Pacific Railroad preferred to hire Chinese laborers as they are able to work in dangerous areas and they worked without complaints. After the railroads were completed, many Chinese immigrants moved to different cities and created Chinatowns due to parts of anti-racism, and they were unable to fit into the American society. Chinese immigrants' growth caused a disturbance in American society. They began to encounter prejudice in the United States and physical violence from white Americans who felt threatened by Chinese workers. It created a racial tension in the nation as many jobs often recruited Chinese workers. It continued to get worse when the American economy weakened. White workers blamed the Chinese for their harsh conditions and low wages. With the anger of the white Americans, their anger continued to progress into a more violent outbreak that spread throughout the nation. 1885, Rock Spring, Wyoming. 150 armed white miners drove countless Chinese people out of town by setting their homes and businesses on fire. 28 people who were unable to escape were murdered during the riot. In other parts of the nation, like Seattle, Washington, a mob went down to Seattle's Chinatown to banish the Chinese living there to Tacoma. The mob set fire to the buildings, so the Chinese who were moved were unable to come back to the place they called home. To deal with the violent outbreaks, on May 6, 1882, President Chester A. Arthur signed and approved the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was the first immigration law that restricted Chinese immigrants from coming to America. It was enacted in response to the economic fear, especially on the West Coast, where native-born Americans attributed unemployment and declining wages to Chinese workers whom they viewed as racially inferior. In 1943, Congress passed the Magnuson Act that repealed the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, when China became an ally against the Imperial Japan. Nevertheless, the 1943 Act still allowed only 105 Chinese immigrants per year, reflecting persisting prejudice against the Chinese in American immigration policy. President Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Immigration and Naturalization Act in 1965, the law that officially abolished earlier quotas system based on national origin. that allowed Chinese immigrants to come into America again. In an interview, I asked one Chinese immigrant on why they came to America, what differences between China and America, and have they ever been discriminated here?
我係小妹，從中國廣州嚟。
點解你會想過嚟美國咯？
因為我媽嚟咗，咁我想跟我媽嚟，所以我咪嚟美國咯。嚟咗美國之後，覺得美國都唔錯，就申請嗰啲細路仔嚟，咁等啲細路仔嘅下一代有好嘅 future 咯。
呢度美國咯，同埋中國咯，有咩分別啊？
美國係一個 international country， 中國係一個14億人口嘅大國，但係美國咧就係、好多國家都嚟呢度，佢比較自由啦，生活又比較安定啦，所以啲人就過嚟美國咯。
喺美國呢度咯，你有冇俾人歧視你啊？
喺美國呢度，咁啊梗係有人歧視啦。第一嚟到呢度唔識英文，第二個環境改變咗，有好多嘢要重新嚟過。咁啲人
In recent years, the population of Chinese immigrants continued to rise, and being able to communicate with each other and leaving our differences, we can build a better future in America, where we do not differentiate one another.